Europe. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by our interview of the day, an exclusive conversation with Ignazio Visco, Banca d'Italia Governor, and Isabel Schnabel's colleague, of course, on the ECB Governing Council. So thank you so much, Governor, for joining us. A lot of talk, of course, at the IMF. It's the third time that the IMF is meeting virtually. The focus is on a better recovery overall. But how worried are you about Europe?
Well, first of all, good morning. Secondly, I think, well, these meetings have been pretty interesting in the sense that two messages have come out. The first is that the global economy is starting really to recover. And secondly, however, that this upturn remains fragile, which is subject to a very high uncertainty, especially related to the uneven pace of vaccination across areas, countries, regions. And this is one of the main concerns that came out from the meetings.
And your take on Europe, do you worry that actually Europe is falling behind? So since the meeting of the ECB last time, of course, things have changed. There's more of lockdown, and now there's concern about the disbursements of the recovery funds.
There are two issues here. One is the emergency. We are still in an emergency situation, and there are certainly in continental Europe delays in vaccination, which is the main reason for both the difficulty in recovering and the slow pace, I would say, at which the population is reacting. My impression is that this recovery fund is crucial. It is certainly, it has a medium-term orientation. In the meanwhile, we have a substantial amount of measures being taken on the fiscal front by all governments in Europe. So we are emphasizing the differences with the United States because in the United States, this Biden fiscal plan is really impressive, but it is mostly direct transfers, as the direct transfers that are operating in all our countries are trying to cope with the necessities of the current period. But really, what is most important is to ensure that in the future years, months and years, clearly we will be able to accompany and maintain a stable recovery through investment in infrastructures and reforms, which is the object of this next generation EU plan.
But, Governor, if there's a divergence between, the stimulus in the U.S. and the stimulus in Europe, how difficult does it actually make it for the ECB and European countries to get on a better footing because of market movements, because of treasury yield movements?
Well, first of all, I think that these divergences are to be put in perspective. Certainly, there is a major divergence in the pace of vaccination. And that is, I think, this is the crucial thing. I said recently that fiscal and monetary policy are crucial, but for the time being, what is crucial really is to accelerate the pace on vaccination. Actually, this is a global issue. It's not limited to Europe, and the divergences there are going to matter very much. So this is the first thing. Secondly, obviously, these movements in the United States are predicated in policies and in markets, are predicated on the fact that the recovery is coming up faster in the U.S., both as a success of vaccination, but also of the effect and the announcements of the measures being taken and being put in place. In Europe, I think we have similar measures. I understand that there is a concern that this recovery plan may take some time before being put in operation, but we have to emphasize that this is something that tries to cope with the moderate, very moderate rate of growth of our economies, which has been the concern, obviously, of the ECB in the last years. Demand is too low, and therefore demand is low for two reasons. But obviously it is not only consumption, it is also investment, and this is why these measures are extremely important.
But Governor, overall, so since the ECB met last, are the risks to the downside because of slow vaccination, because of the lockdowns in Europe, or is it on the upside? Sorry, risks to the downside, so the situation is getting better simply because of the stimulus coming from the U.S.?
Well, first of all, I think clearly the stimulus of this, from the U.S. is going to be very important. We are doing okay on the manufacturing side. We have a number of domestic problems. The sectors which have been mostly hit are accommodations, recreation, culture, and so on. Certainly in Italy, they are extremely important, and therefore there is a lot to be done on that side. But certainly the stimulus from the U.S. is very relevant. I'm trying to say that we also have substantial fiscal transfers in place. We have really to understand how the future will change, and therefore how both the organization of work, production, and therefore policies have to change.
Governor, one reason why the ECB stepped up its bond buying program was actually, investors were thinking one thing, and if you looked at businesses and consumers, they just weren't as optimistic. Now we've had a good set of numbers in terms of PMIs and things like that. How much does it change your thinking about bond buying?
Well, I think yes, there is the issue which really have to consider is expectations about the future on the part of households, consumers at large. There is fears, and these fears have to be reduced. There is a need for intervention on the public sector side. Certainly, health infrastructures are a fundamental area where to invest and change. We are seeing an increase in savings, a substantial increase in savings, not only as a consequence of the lockdowns and the difficulty to spend, but also for precautionary reasons, jobs and security, but also fear of having to spend more for health reasons. And I think this has to be accommodated, because scarce may be something that may make the difficulties long-lasting. So I think this is the area where confidence has to be restored. This is why also vaccination has really to be faster. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we have to find a way to accelerate the exit from the tunnel.
But so, Governor, so what does it mean for actually ECB policy? There, Classic Note was basically intimating that you should start discussing possibly winding down PEP in the third quarter. Do you agree with that? Is it too soon? Like, what's your thinking on the kind of timing that markets should be looking at?
Well, I think that really measures have to be maintained as long as necessary to err on the perhaps a little bit postponing the exit is less worrisome than winding down too early. We have a large number of small and medium firms which have been heavily hit. Most of them are profitable once things will return to some sort of normality. And we have to avoid really a sequence of insolvencies. As a matter of fact, up to now, things have been very positive, extremely limited number of insolvencies. Even the issue of zombification, as I said, is to be taken with a grain of salt, a real grain of salt. I'm much more positive on that. On the other hand, I would also think that we have to be very careful in becoming more selective as uncertainty is reduced and macroeconomic conditions improve.
Governor, thank you so much, as always, for giving us a little bit of your busy day. Ignazio Visco there, the Banca d'Italia Governor and the ECB Governing Council member. Now, Smart Conversations on Bloomberg Surveillance, early edition this hour.